time. Cool. Okay, one more time again. That works. I'll tell you what. So how many of you either own or have ever owned a gun? That's probably most of us. All right. How many of you know how to use it if you do own one? All right. Well, that's good too. That's good. That's a good thing to know. You know, one of the most awesome things about living in the U.S. of A. is the fact that the first two amendments of our Constitution guarantee us the right to worship in any way that we see fit, and the Second Amendment guarantees us the right to protect that first right, right? And all those other things that might come after that. That's really a cool thing, the right to bear arms. You know, not only do I cherish the fact that I can worship God in any way that I see fit, which is a really good thing, because I'll tell you what, most of the religious world even these days, man, I shouldn't say just these days, but most of the religious world really doesn't even want us to worship the way we worship a lot of times. They've got their rules and regulations on that too. But I also hold the right to defend myself and my family at a very high degree, as one of the highest honors and responsibilities, God-given responsibilities that I have. I mean, that's what God has called us to do, and I think that we need to do that. However, one of the things I learned at a very early age when it came to firearms and those kind of things is that no matter how safe you think your gun might be, no matter how many times you've unloaded it, no matter how many times you've checked it to be sure that it's unloaded, you must always assume it's loaded. How many of you know that? Okay, if you didn't know that, you know that now. Always assume it's loaded. Never assume that you've unloaded it. I don't care how many times you checked it and you're sure that it is unloaded. Always assume it's loaded. Why? Because that way you will never point it in anyone's direction. You'll never sweep the muzzle in anybody's direction unless you plan on using it, you know? And if you plan on using it, you better use it. Otherwise, don't point it at anyone for any reason, okay? Never, ever do that. Interestingly, James talks about another potentially dangerous weapon, one that we all possess. And actually, he says that this weapon that we all possess, it's the most dangerous part of your body, the most dangerous member of your body. Everybody has one. You want me to show you mine? Yeah. Go ahead, show me yours back. All right, thank you. Yeah. James says that is the most dangerous weapon in the entire world, okay? It doesn't matter what part of the world we might live in, doesn't matter where we are, who we are, no matter how young or how old we are, James still says it is the most dangerous weapon known to man, you know? Now, James indicates the tongue is not just a dangerous weapon in the sense of, being a small weapon, a handgun or whatever. As a matter of fact, speaking of which, if a license is required to carry a handgun, it looks to me like a license ought to be required to carry a tongue as well, I think hopefully you'll see that by the time we're done here today, because James has some really big, strong things to say about that little appendage in our mouth, So in verses 5 through 8, James tells us that the tongue is even more destructive than a handgun, more destructive than a semi-automatic rifle, even more destructive than a fully automatic rifle, machine gun, because the tongue can and often is a weapon of mass destruction, And it has the power to totally destroy, literally destroy, entire communities, cities, and nations. The tongue has that power to destroy not just individuals, but entire cities, countries, nations, you name it, all that. So by way of explanation then, or by way of helping us to understand what he's talking about here, James uses several different word pictures or analogies or whatever some of them other big words are to illustrate the fact that the tongue is a weapon of mass destruction. Not just a weapon of a little bit of destruction or even a lot of destruction, but a weapon of mass destruction. He compares the tongue, first of all, to a forest fire. He also compares it to a stampede of wild horses or maybe buffalo When I thought about that, I was thinking back, in the historical novels and stuff I've read from back in those days, and you probably read some of that stuff too, about the buffalo that will sweep through the country way back in the 1800s, and maybe a mile wide, and take an hour or two to pass by, and just literally, totally destroy everything in their path with their pounding hooves. That's what James is talking about here. And so he uses these things. He also says it's like a den of poisonous snakes. That's pretty, I don't think I like that at all. Some of you are snake hunters, I know that, but not me. That's not my game. I don't care for that. Okay, so the first analogy or first illustration has to do with a forest fire, about how a very small spark can actually start a fire that can quickly and easily burn down the whole mountain. It really can. He says, so also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. That really hits home with me and my family, actually, because just before we moved here to the El Paso area, just before we moved in this area, we lived in near Sacramento, or Weed, New Mexico, which is south of Cloudcroft, about 25 miles back in the mountains there. And a small fire got started one afternoon. I don't know, about 2 or maybe 3, probably 3 o'clock. Got started over in Scott Abel Canyon, if anybody of you know where Scott Abel is, and it was actually about 25 miles from where we lived, about southwest of where we lived, 25 miles away. And, 25 miles, if you can kind of get an idea what that is, I mean, most of the way to Las Cruces, or halfway to Columbus, New Mexico, or maybe out to Horizon City or out in that area somewhere, I don't know. But a long ways, right? A long ways off. And when we first spotted it, you could just see just a little wisp of smoke that came up. That's all you could see. Of course, if you live in the mountains and as dry as it is some years, like this year, last several years, it just makes you afraid right away, because you know what it can do. You know what can happen. It's a really scary kind of a thing. And the fact is that even though that may sound like a long ways off, 25 miles across the mountains, up and down, and all that kind of stuff, from the time that we saw that little tiny wisp of smoke until it was literally at our doorstep was 3 hours. 25 miles burned approximately 60 square miles. 60 square miles. Can you imagine? In 3 hours. Unbelievable. It was a horrible experience. I don't think our family will ever forget it, I don't think we'll ever forget what that was like. As a matter of fact, the smoke was so thick that it literally blotted out the sun. It was like midnight in the middle of the day, literally. It was really something. And you could hear that fire. It sounded like a freight train going through your front yard. And 10 miles away was a place called Sky Ridge Christian Camp. And that was 10 miles from us. And of course, there were people that lived there sometimes, part of the year, whatever. It was kind of a place where people bought little cabins and that kind of thing. It was a Christian camp as well. And so everybody had a propane tank, right? Well, when the fire came through that area, we could hear those propane tanks exploding 10 miles away. Yeah. Unbelievable. Matter of fact, the funny thing was is when I went up there, several years after that fire was over with, and one of those propane tanks was sitting beside the road that hadn't exploded, but it looked like a pig. It was a 250 gallons propane tank, and it was swole up like this in the middle, Unbelievable. It was really cool looking, but that's what happened. The fire got so hot that it actually, that steel in those tanks, however thick that is, to hold all that pressure and everything, and it just swole that tank up. It looked like a pig with four little short legs on it. Unbelievable. But unbelievable destruction. Unbelievable destruction. Matter of fact, probably 2 miles from us on the ridge, as the fire came over that ridge, we could see the fire was heating the trees in front of it. There wasn't any fire there yet. And what would happen is that it would superheat those huge trees, 150-foot tall trees. It would superheat them, and then they'd just explode. Boom! And flame would go 300 feet in the air. Unbelievable. You could hear it explode 2 miles away. a tree. It superheated the sap inside that tree. And when it finally got to a certain temperature, it just literally exploded. Man. A few years back, O'Reilly, I think most of you know who Bill O'Reilly is probably, he actually admitted to the fact that he said, here's his words, he said, "We in the media are very powerful. We can ruin lives and damage the country in ways that affect every American." Is that true? James says it is. You know it is. You know it is. All it takes is one little word from a high-up person in our government to change everything. Life as you know it will be totally changed from this point on. So, have you ever noticed how many words and phrases that we use today that kind of betray that fiery language that we use? The fiery, anyway, I think you understand what I'm saying. Different words that we use betray that fiery kind of stuff that we do, the fiery nature of words. We say, well, I'm burned out. There's fire, right? I'm burned out. Or we say, well, I'm hot under the collar. Well, that's more heat, more fire. Or we might say, well, hopefully you haven't heard the words, "You're fired." Anybody ever heard those words? Don't answer that. Don't answer that, you know. Or we might say, well, I'm all fired up, you know. Now, my dad always used to say, "Where there's smoke, there's fire, son," you know. Yeah. So there's and you can think of lots and lots of different words, right? Lots of different other phrases that we use in everyday language that betray that fiery nature of words that we use and the way fire acts, okay? So actually the writer of Proverbs says, "A worthless man digs up evil while his words are a scorching fire." I want you to notice this picture. Oh, man. Yeah, okay, now I can see it. It's almost impossible to pick out. Right by the letter A, on A, worthless, there's a man or a woman's head there. Can you see the ear? The shoulder is back this way. It's actually one of those people that puts alcohol or whatever in their mouth and spews it out. That's what that is. That's not amazing? Wow. Yeah. A good illustration. Good illustration. Good picture to say, yeah, the words are very, very fiery, you know. So James says that even though the tongue is a very small appendage, it commonly boasts of great things. Yeah, I'd say so. I was talking to my younger brother on the phone a while back. It's been a while back. And he was bragging to me, of course, through the conversation, he was bragging to me about how him and his 3 grown boys, and his 3 grown boys are like, well, 1 or 2 of them like that, you know. And he's bragging to me about how him and his 3 grown boys had branded and castrated the whole herd in one day. Well, I knew better because I knew that his herd consisted of 1 pregnant cow and 1 bull calf. Right? Okay, you know, so of course I wasn't going to be outdone, so I bragged right back at him. I said, well, I'll tell you what, how much rain you had lately? Oh, not very much. Well, we had a 12-inch rain yesterday. Really? Yeah. You know, raindrops 12 inches apart. Or maybe 12 raindrops on your windshield. You know, how many? I haven't seen rain and I can't remember when. I don't know. Not rain. A couple of weeks ago, there was we had a couple of spots on the windshield, and my heart fluttered, but there wasn't anything to it. Yeah, that was the end of it. You know, we haven't had rain in a long, long time. So, where does this boasting, where does bragging come from? What causes us to want to brag about stuff and to say things that we know either aren't true or we can't live up to or whatever? Where's that come from? Why do we think we have to do that? Well, John says in 1 John 2:16, he says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but from the world." It's from our flesh. It's because we are fleshly beings. We're prideful beings. We want to always build ourselves up to be bigger than we are. We almost, somebody tells us a story, we got to tell a bigger story. Those kind of things. It's in a sense kind of part of human nature because we have that within us. The writer of Proverbs says that pride and the boastful, boasting, of course, bragging that pride goes along with pride, He said, goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling. Okay, I would agree with that. I'd say that's exactly right. So James says in verse 6, he says, and the tongue is a fire, the world of iniquity. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body and is set on fire of our life and is set on fire by hell. That's kind of a scary thing, isn't it? That kind of makes you, set on fire by hell? I mean, I guess that's not a good thing, right? That's what I get from it. It's not a good thing. Is that what you got from it? Okay, all right. We're on the same page then. We're good. So far, so good. Wow. Paul says in Romans 3:13 that their throat is an open grave. With their tongues they keep deceiving. The poison of asps is under their lips. Ew. Wow. Okay. So the question is, what can be done about it, right? We know that's a problem. We know that the tongue is a weapon of mass destruction. We know that it can destroy entire, communities, cities, nations, the world, whatever. But what can be done about it? Is there anything? Wow. Well, actually, James says directly in verse 7 that even though every species of beasts and birds, of reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by the human race. That's pretty inclusive, isn't it? That seems pretty amazing to me. Is or has been tamed by the human race. But no one can tame the tongue. How many people can tame the tongue? No one. You say, well, I can. I can keep my tongue in my head if I want to. Oh, according to this verse, you can't. Sound like more bragging to me. I'd like to think that I can. I'd like to think that I can do the right thing at the right time, say the right thing at the right time, but you know what? That doesn't always happen. Not very encouraging, is it, to say that no one can tame the tongue? That's not very encouraging at all. No one can tame the tongue. So I don't think there's any doubt, at least from the human perspective, that the tongue is a weapon of mass destruction that can destroy anything, entire nations. And no, there's not a single one of us that can keep our tongue in our head all the time, never have a problem with it. As a matter of fact, usually when the tongue does go off, it's kind of when you least expect it, isn't it? It's like they say you can't call your words back. Well, why would you say that except for the fact that you said something you wouldn't have said if you hadn't have thought about it for a second? Anybody here hasn't ever done that? I've done that way too many times. Way too many times. Problem is, they're recording me, so if I say it, it's too late, right? Dang nabbit. Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. So James gives us a really important piece of advice in verse 19 about how we can keep our tongue from, getting out of control. How we can at least, keep it bridled, keep it down, at least to some degree. He says, but everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Quick to hear. I guess that means that your ears are open before your mouth flies open. I've talked to, there are a few people that I know in my life, that have known in my life, that were a little bit hard to talk to for that reason. You ever known somebody like that? One guy I knew on the mountain, that when you talked to him and you'd ask him a question, and it was kind of like, hello? Are you still there? That's what you felt like, because he took so long, it seemed to me, to answer you back. I think he had a great idea, myself. I wish I could do that more often, because I'm more quick to answer than I am quick to hear. Maybe I'm not alone in this. I often think I've got the answers, But he says here that we need to be quick to hear, listen carefully first, and then be slow to give an answer, slow to speak. And even when somebody says something to you that you don't like, somebody calls you a bad name or accuses you of whatever, we still need to be quick to hear, but slow to speak and slow to anger. Don't get angry right away, because if you think that through, it may have sounded bad to you, but that might not have been actually what they said. One of the things that I was taught many, many years ago was that a good thing to do when you're in a conversation, especially a confrontation, which I absolutely hate. I hate confrontation more than I hate anything else. I am terrified of confrontation, and that's why I often will do what I do to try to get out of it, which isn't a good thing. But especially when you get into confrontation or any kind of conversation, is to say back to the person, if I'm hearing you right, I think this is what you're saying, right? Repeat their words back to them, or repeat them back to them in a different form to say, I think this is what you're saying. Well, again, what that does is it gives you time to think it through yourself and to find out if that's really what they meant. Because I'll bet that the words that you say and the phrases you put together, not everybody understands it. If you come from a certain part of the country, you use phrases that people here don't understand. If you come from here and go somewhere else, you probably use phrases they don't understand. They might be offended. Well, you didn't mean it that way. That's not what you said. So he says here to be, quick to hear. Yeah, listen, that's good. Listen to all they have to say. Let them talk. I remember my dad used to say, well, give them enough rope, they'll hang themselves. Or when I'd start saying something that I knew wasn't right, and he'd start getting that grin, and he'd say, just keep talking. Keep talking. Is he just talking yourself in deeper and deeper and deeper until, if you get old, if you finally learn that, when you say it the first time, shut up. Remember the video I showed last week about that guy and his pinch his tits thing? If you haven't seen that, go back and look last week's, or a week before, actually. Yeah. Said from the pulpit, and then he tried to get himself out of it over and over and over again. Just got deeper and deeper, got worse and worse, right? Doesn't pay. It just doesn't pay, man, I'm telling you. So that's why he tells us here to be quick to hear and slow to speak and slow to anger, because that's not always what's going on, I like what Russ Caldwell, you don't know who Russ Caldwell is, right? But he's in that. How many of you have seen the Culpeper Cattle Company? Good show, good Western. And so at one point he tells this kid, he says, don't let your mouth overload your hardware, cowboy. Yeah, don't let your mouth overload your hardware. Or I read somewhere else that don't say giddy up to your mouth before your mind is hitched up to it. I like that too. Yeah. And there's other phrases, like don't let your hummingbird overload your alligator mouth. You've heard that one too. But that's not all that easy all the time, is it? It sounds okay, sounds good advice. But it's not always that easy. Even when we stop and think before we put our tongue into gear, sometimes we still will open our mouths and the wrong thing comes out. We're better off to say nothing at all, but we just can't seem to help it sometimes. So is there an answer to this whole tongue control thing? Well, I think really, honestly, the answer is found in Galatians 5:16, where Paul says, walk by the Spirit, and you'll not carry out the desires of the flesh. You remember what James said in verse 6? He said the tongue is set on fire of hell itself. Well, what's the opposite of hell itself? Well, heaven, or the Holy Spirit, or God, right? So if we're walking by the Spirit, if we're allowing the Holy Spirit to live His life through us, He will not lead us in the paths of unrighteousness. If we're allowing Him to control our lives and to control our tongue and to control our thoughts, then He will be there to guide what we say, So it's only then, in my opinion, the only way to do this then, to control the tongue, is to surrender our tongue to God, to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit, And then, he is the one then who will control our tongue, not us be in control of our tongue. Does that mean you'll never say anything wrong? We already found out that's not the case, right? No one can tame the tongue. But it's a really good way to put the brakes on. Matter of fact, it's the only way. So there's no doubt that the tongue has, great power to destroy all kinds of things. I mean, so is this something that only happens to, politicians, the media, school teachers, pastors, preachers, people in those kinds? No, that's not the only people have problem with that, is it? As a matter of fact, it actually comes down to every individual. And as a matter of fact, you as an individual has that power within you to actually destroy entire communities. The writer of Proverbs tells us that. He says there are 6 things which the Lord hates. And then he says, oh, no, yeah, there's 7 that are abomination to him. No. So Solomon's writer, is he confused? Is that his problem? Is he saying, there's 6? I recount there's 7 things that God hates, right? No, that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is this is a literary device that is used to put the emphasis on the last thing as being the most important, or actually being the first thing, right? At the top of the pile. He's going to give us 7 things, and then he says the last thing is the worst, right? That's what's happening. He's putting emphasis on this last thing. Anybody want to guess what the last thing is? Gossip. Spreading discord among the brethren. That's probably KJV. Right? Gossip. How does gossip start? With one person who tells another person. And those people tell another person who tell another person until, you know what? It doesn't take long at all. It's exponential. You know what I mean when I say that? It's 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 4 is 8, 8 plus 8 is 16, so on and so forth, until it's exponential. It doubles every time. It doubles every time. So that double also doubles. That double also doubles. Until it's an entire community. We've lived in communities where entire communities have been destroyed, literally destroyed by gossip. Literally destroyed by gossip. And you don't think that can happen right here in El Paso? You don't think this whole entire city could be destroyed by something like that? Absolutely it can. Matter of fact, that's exactly what they try to do with politics, is destroy the other person and cause everybody's mind to be poisoned toward a particular individual. And they all do it. It doesn't matter. They all do it. There are 6 things. No. The 7th thing God hates the most is gossip. That's pretty serious. That's something we need to listen to. That's something we need to take heed to. And God hates it. Because gossip is the way that the tongue is used to destroy everyone. And that's exactly what James is talking about when he says, have you ever noticed how one little spark can start this forest fire that burns down the whole mountain? That's what he's saying. Have you ever noticed how one little phone call can destroy a whole city? Yeah. As a matter of fact, I have. Proverbs 18:21 also says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. You want to see mine one more time? Show me yours. Go ahead. Yeah, I want to see that. Lord bless you all. Amen. Give God a hand.